The wind came first. It moved through the trees like a rushing tide, bending tall pines until their tops swayed wildly. Branches rattled and snapped under its force. Rian had heard storms before, but this was different. The sound was not the deep rumble of normal weather. It was sharper, louder, like the sky itself was tearing apart. He was sitting near the old wood stove in his cabin, sharpening a small hunting knife. The blade scraped against the stone in slow, steady strokes outside. Rain began to drum on the roof, heavy and unrelenting. In the mountains, storms could turn dangerous fast, but Rian had built his cabin strong, and he trusted it to hold. A sudden flash lit the inside of the cabin with a strange green glow. It was not the white or blue light of normal lightning. This was deeper in color, almost like the light from deep water. Before Rian could move, the sound followed. It was not a crack or a boom. It was a roar that seemed to come from all directions at once. The wooden walls shivered, and dust fell from the ceiling beams. Rian set the knife down and stepped to the window. His breath fogged the cold glass. The forest outside was a chaos of whipping branches and rain so thick he could barely see more. Then a few paces, then, between the trees, he caught sight of movement. At first he thought it was an animal, maybe a deer or a bear, but the shape was wrong. It was tall and thin, moving quickly but unsteadily as if fighting against the wind. He frowned and reached for the old lantern hanging on a hook by the door. The thought of anyone being out in this storm made no sense. The nearest town was miles away, and the mountain trails were dangerous even on calm days. A heavy thud struck the side of the cabin, followed by the sound of someone stumbling. Rian pulled open the door, and cold rain slapped his face. A figure stood on the small porch. Soaked through, she was taller than most women he had met, with long limbs and a thin frame that looked built for speed rather than strength. Her clothing clung to her skin, strange in its design, with smooth panels that caught the light like polished stone. Her face was unlike any Rian had seen. The skin had a faint shimmer, almost metallic under the lantern glow. Her eyes were large, oval-shaped, and their color shifted between silver and pale blue as they moved. She stood there shivering, her breathing quick and sharp. Her gaze flicked past Rian into the cabin, then back to his face, as if unsure if she should enter. "You need shelter," Rian said, raising his voice over the storm. She hesitated for a long moment, then stepped forward. The rainwater ran off her strange clothing in small streams, pooling on the wooden floor. Rian shut the door behind her, blocking out the wind and noise. The room grew quiet except for the sound of the rain above and her uneven breaths. She looked around the cabin as if memorizing every detail. Her eyes lingered on the stove, the wooden shelves, and the rows of tools hung on the far wall. Rian took a step toward the fire and pointed to a chair near it. "Sit, warm yourself." She moved carefully, as if unused to the space. When she sat down, the light from the fire cast a soft glow on her strange features. She pulled a small object from her belt and set it on her lap. Rian noticed it was made of a smooth black material with faint markings, none of which he could read. "What happened out there?" Rian asked. For a moment, she did not answer. Then, in a low voice with an unfamiliar accent, she spoke. "The storm. I did not expect it." Rian raised an eyebrow. "No one expects this kind of storm. But people who live here know how to avoid getting caught in one." Her gaze shifted away. She seemed to search for the right words. "I'm not from here." Rian thought she meant from another town or another country, but something in the way she said it made him feel she meant more than that. He glanced toward the window again. The storm outside was still violent, but there was something else in the air now. The strange light, the roar earlier, it all felt connected. He noticed her hands. They were trembling slightly, not just from the cold. She was alert, listening for something beyond the sound of the rain. "Is someone after you?" he asked her. Eyes snapped back to his, and for the first time, he saw real fear there. "They will come. The storm will not hide me for long." The words made Rian's stomach tighten. He was no stranger to trouble in these mountains, but the way she spoke carried a weight far beyond local danger. He thought about asking more questions, but the storm gave a sudden deep rumble, and the ground under the cabin shook. It was brief, but enough to make the lantern sway on its hook. Rian grabbed it before it fell. When he looked back at her, she was staring at the door as if expecting it to burst open at any second. "You are safe here," Rian said, unsure why he felt the need to promise that to a complete stranger. She studied him for a long moment. "We will see." Rian felt the air in the cabin grow heavier. Whatever this woman had brought with her was more than just a need for shelter. It was something that could change the course of his quiet life in ways he could not yet imagine. The storm outside roared again, but inside the cabin, it was the silence between them that felt most dangerous. The storm outside had no sign of ending. Rain hammered the roof and rolled down the small windows in thick streams. The wind howled around the cabin, making the walls creak. Inside, the fire crackled and sent a warm glow across the room, but it did little to ease the tension between Rian and his strange guest. She sat near the stove with her knees drawn close, both hands holding the small black object she had carried in. Her eyes kept moving toward the door and window as if she expected something to appear at any moment. The shimmering quality of her skin caught the firelight, making her look even more unreal. Rian poured hot water from a kettle into a tin cup and placed it on the table near her. "Drink this. It will help with the cold." She glanced at the cup but did not move to take it. Instead, she studied him with a steady gaze, as if weighing his intentions. Finally, she reached for it, her long fingers wrapping around the handle. She sipped slowly, her silver blue eyes never fully leaving his face. "What is your name?" Rian asked. After a pause, she replied, "Loom." The sound was soft, almost like a breath. "I am Rian," he said. "You are a long way from any town. How did you get here?" Loom's gaze lowered to the black object in her lap. "I traveled far," she said. Her answer was too simple for the weight in her voice. Rian had lived alone for years and knew when someone was hiding the truth. He thought about pressing for more information, but something in her posture told him she would not say more right now. The cabin shook again, though this time it was not from thunder. It felt like a heavy weight had dropped somewhere in the forest. Rian moved to the window, but the storm made it impossible to see far. Lightning flashed, and for a brief second, he thought he saw a faint glow deep between the trees. Loom's eyes narrowed at the same moment. She set the cup down and stood. "I have to go," she said. "You will not make it far in this storm." Rian told her, "And if something dangerous is out there, you are better off staying inside." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "If I stay, they will find me. If I go, I might lose them." Rian did not know who they were, but he did not like the sound of it. His instincts told him that whatever trouble she carried, it was real and it was close. Another flash lit the forest. Rian saw movement, this time dark shapes shifting between the trees. They were too far away to see clearly, but their movements were not random. It looked like a search. Loom turned toward the door, but Rian stepped in her way. "You cannot walk straight into them," he said. Her voice was sharp but low. "You do not understand. They are not here for you. They are here for me. If I stay, you will be in danger." Rian stared at her. The storm outside was bad enough, but now there was the threat of whoever those shapes were. Still, something inside him refused to let her walk out into certain danger. "You came to my door for shelter. That makes you my responsibility for tonight," he said. Loom looked at him for a long moment, as if trying to read his mind. Finally, she stepped back from the door. Her shoulders lowered slightly, though her eyes stayed sharp. Rian went to the corner of the cabin and retrieved an old rifle from its rack. It was not much, but it had kept him safe from wolves and the occasional bear. He checked the chamber, then set it near the table. "You are preparing to fight them," Loom said quietly. "I am preparing to make sure they do not walk into my home without an invitation," Rian replied. She tilted her head slightly, her gaze curious now rather than guarded. "Most would send me away." "Why do you not?" Rian poked the fire with a metal rod, sending sparks up the chimney. "Because you knocked on my door. That means you are under my roof." "I am not the kind of man who forgets that. For the first time, Loom's expression softened. It was not quite a smile, but there was a flicker of something warmer in her eyes. The wind outside roared again, and the rain seemed to grow heavier. Rian could hear the farce groaning under the force of the storm. Somewhere far off, a sharp metallic sound rang out, different from the natural noise of the weather. Loom's head snapped toward the window. "They are searching," she whispered. "They will move closer soon." Rian's jaw tightened. He could feel the air shifting, not just from the storm, but from whatever was moving out there. He began mentally mapping the land around his cabin, the slope of the ground, the thickest trees, the narrow path leading to the door. He had used the terrain to his advantage many times before, though never against anything like this. He glanced at Loom. "If they come, do they come to take you or to harm you?" Her eyes met his without hesitation. "They will take me, and if I resist, they will end me." Rian let the words sink in. His life in the mountains had taught him to read truth in a person's voice, and he could hear it in hers. He also heard something else: fear not for herself alone, but for whatever she carried with her. His gaze dropped to the black object in her lap. "What is that?" he asked. Loom's hands closed around it, her fingers tightening. "It is the reason they follow me. If they get it, they will use it against more than just me." Rian's curiosity burned, but before he could ask more, a loud thump came from outside. It was close to close. The cabin's lantern flickered with the vibration. Both of them turned to the window. A shadow moved past, tall and deliberate, not like any animal. Rian knew. "They are here," Loom said. Rian took a slow breath. Then they picked the wrong cabin. The cabin fell into a deep stillness after the shadow passed the window. The only sounds were the fire's low crackle and the steady beat of rain on the roof. Rian stood with his hand resting on the stock of his rifle, eyes fixed on the door. Loom did not move, but her body was tense, ready to act at a moment's notice. The storm made it hard to hear footsteps outside, but Rian's years in the mountains had trained him to notice the difference between the wind's howl and the faint shift of weight on wet ground. Something was circling. He gave a small gesture to Loom, pointing toward the corner where the shadows were thickest. She moved quietly, her steps making no sound on the wooden floor. Even in her silence, she kept one hand on the strange black object, guarding it as if it were more important than her own life. Rian set the lantern low so the light stayed close to the floor. Bright light could draw attention to the windows, and he wanted the inside darker than the outside. That way, he and Loom could watch without being seen easily. A soft scrape reached his ears, metal on wood. It came from the far side of the cabin. Where the small storage shed was attached, Rian knew every inch of that wall. There was no way to open it from the outside without forcing the latch. "They are checking the shed," he whispered. Loom's silver blue eyes caught the faint firelight. "They will not stop there." Rian nodded once. He moved toward the back window and pulled the curtain aside by just an inch. Through the sheet of rain, he saw a dark figure crouched near the shed door. Its body was tall and narrow, covered in armor that reflected the green lightning above. The helmet had no clear visor, just a smooth front that looked more like a mask. The figure worked on the latch with quick, practiced movements. Rian's grip tightened on the rifle. His mind worked fast. Firing now could scare the rest away, but it could also draw them straight to the cabin in force. He stepped back and looked at Loom. "How many are there?" She did not hesitate. "At least 4, maybe more. They will spread out. They always do." "Always?" Rian asked. Her voice was low and steady. "They have hunted me since I escaped my world. They know how to corner their target." The thought of her being chased across worlds was hard for Rian to imagine, but the truth in her tone left no room for doubt. The shed latch gave a faint metallic pop, and the door creaked open. Rian's jaw tightened. Inside that shed were tools, spare firewood, and some food stores. If the intruders searched long enough, they might find the back door into the cabin's storage space. Rian motioned for Loom to stay in the corner. He slid quietly toward the back wall, keeping low. His boots made no noise on the wood. Near the small inner door to the shed, he waited, listening. The sound of boots on the shed floor was slow but certain. The intruder moved with the confidence of someone who believed they would not be stopped. Rian waited until the steps came close to the inner door. Then, with one swift motion, he slammed the bolt down on the inside latch. The intruder tried the handle immediately, but the door stayed firm. A low, strange hum came from the other side, almost like an annoyed growl, but mechanical. Then the sound of retreating steps followed. Rian returned to the main room. Loom was still in the corner, watching him closely. "They did not get in," he said. "But they will try something else soon." She nodded, her expression serious. "They will test your defenses before they come in force." Another flash lit the forest, and in that brief burst of light, Rian saw two more figures moving between the trees. They were getting closer to the cabin's front. He thought quickly, if they want you, they have to come through me. If they come through me, they will regret it. Loom tilted her head slightly. "You speak with certainty. Why?" "Because this is my home," Rian replied, "and I know every inch of it better than they ever will." The sound of light tapping came. Next, not knocking, tapping. It came from the side window. Rian moved to it slowly, staying out of direct sight. When he peeked through the smallest gap in the curtain, he saw a third figure standing almost still, tapping something on the glass with a thin metal tool. The tapping stopped, and a small spark danced against the pane. Rian understood immediately they were trying to cut through. He stepped back, took aim, and fired a single round into the wooden frame just inches from the intruder's hand. The sound was deafening inside the cabin, and the recoil pushed against his shoulder. The figure jerked back instantly, retreating into the rain. No blood, no cry, just a quick disappearance into the storm. Loom's eyes followed his movements. "You could have struck the target." "I did not need to," Rian said. "Sometimes warning fire works better. Now they know I am ready and watching." Loom studied him with a look that mixed surprise and thoughtfulness. "Humans are not what I expected." Before Rian could respond, a sharp metallic thud echoed against the roof. Both of them looked up at once. Something had landed there. Rian raised his rifle, but Loom shook her head. "If they are on the roof, it means they want to force an entry from above. You cannot shoot what you cannot see." He lowered the gun slightly, thinking. The cabin's roof had a small attic space, but it was cramped and hard to move in. He had only used it for storage. If someone tried to drop in from there, they would have to break through thick beams. Another thud sounded, followed by the scrape of metal on wood. Rian's voice was calm, but his mind was working fast. "Let them waste their time. I built that roof to hold heavy snow. It will take more than them to break through it quickly." Loom's gaze stayed fixed on the ceiling. "They are testing you now. The real strike will come soon." Rian checked the rifle again, then looked at her. "Then we make sure they find more than they bargained for." The uneasy silence returned, but this time it carried a sharp edge. Both of them knew the night was far from over. The night grew darker, yet the storm did not slow. The rain fell in heavy sheets, and every gust of wind rattled the cabin's shutters. Rian stood at the front window, watching the farce between flashes of lightning. Loom stayed close to the fire, holding the black object in both hands. Her eyes fixed on the door as if expecting it to burst open. Another green flash lit the sky, and for a brief second, the world outside was as bright as day. Rian's gaze swept across the slope leading down from the cabin, over the trees, and toward the valley beyond. That was when he saw it. Near the forest's edge, half hidden by rain and shadow, lay a glowing shape. It was not natural. The light it gave off pulsed softly, the same green hue as the strange lightning, even from this distance. Rian could see it was partly buried in mud and broken branches. Its smooth surface curved like the hull of a ship, though no ship he had ever seen looked like that. "What is that?" he asked. Loom's head turned sharply toward the window. Her eyes followed his line of sight, and her expression changed. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "That is mine," she said quietly. "You mean that thing in the valley?" She nodded once. "It is my craft. I crashed when the storm began." Rian's brow furrowed. "Your craft? That is not anything from Earth, is it?" Loom looked back at the fire. "No, it is from my world, and it carries something those who follow me cannot be allowed to take." The weight in her voice was enough to make Rian understand that whatever was inside that craft was more important than her safety. Maybe even more important than his. Is that why they are here? Rian asked. Yes, she said. They have tracked me for many days across many places. I thought your world might hide me, but they found me before I could hide the craft. Another flash came, and this time Rian saw movement near the glowing wreck. Dark figures, two of them, moved with precision, circling the ship, even at a distance. He could tell they were searching for something. They found it, Rian said. They will search for the core, Loom replied, her grip tightened on the black object in her lap. They will think it is still inside. Rian's eyes narrowed. That's the core. Yes, without it, the craft is useless to them. But if they get it, they will have a weapon strong enough to destroy much more than one ship. Rian thought quickly. Then they will come for you when they realize you have it. Loom looked up at him. They already know. A loud crack of thunder shook the cabin. This time it was followed by a distant, high-pitched sound, metal tearing. Under force, Rian turned to the window again. One of the figures near the craft was forcing open a panel on its side. The glow brightened, spilling green light across the trees. They are breaking it apart, Rian said. They are searching for the core before the storm destroys what is left, Loom answered. The sight sparked something in Rian. He had seen scavengers in the mountains before, humans who came to steal what they could from others. But this was different. These hunters were not just thieves, they were soldiers. And they were here on his land. We cannot let them have time, Rian said firmly. If they finish with the craft, they will come here ready. Loom studied him. You are willing to fight for something that is not yours? It is on my land now, Rian replied. And they are on my land too. That is enough for me. She held his gaze for a moment, then gave a slow nod. If we act before they gather, we might keep them from calling the others. Rian moved to the back of the cabin and pulled out a small pack. Inside, he placed extra ammunition, a coil of rope, and a metal flashlight. Loom rose from her seat and slipped the black object into a pouch at her side. You will need to keep that hidden, Rian said. I will not let it out of my hands, she replied. The wind howled outside as they opened the door. Cold rain slapped against Rian's face instantly. He pulled his coat tighter and stepped into the storm. The trees swayed overhead, their branches groaning under the force of the wind. Loom moved behind him, quick and silent, her long strides keeping pace with ease. The slope down to the valley was slick with mud. Rian's boots sank deep with each step, but he knew the path well. Lightning flashed again, and the glowing craft loomed larger through the rain. The two figures were still there, working on its side. Rian stopped and crouched behind a fallen log. Loom knelt beside him. If we get closer, they will see us, she said. That is the point, Rian answered. But they will not know from where. He pointed to a cluster of rocks to the left. You take that side, stay low. If they move toward you, circle back here. I will draw their attention. She hesitated. You will risk yourself to protect me and the core. Rian gave a short nod. Humans protect their guests. That is how we survive out here. Her expression shifted, something unreadable passing across her features. Then she moved quickly toward the rocks. Rian watched her disappear into the shadows before shifting his focus back to the craft. The rain masked most sounds, but the hunters' movements were sharp and quick. One of them turned, scanning the trees with a strange, glowing lens. Rian took aim and fired a single shot at the mud near its feet. The crack of the rifle echoed through the valley. The figure spun toward him. Weapon raised, Rian ducked behind the log and rolled to the side. Another shot rang out, not from his rifle, but from Loom's weapon, a small silver device that fired with a faint pulse of light. The second hunter stumbled back, sparks flashing across its armor. The first hunter rushed toward the log. Rian swung his rifle up, catching the figure in the chest with the stock. The force knocked it backward into the mud before it could rise. Loom appeared from the side and fired again, forcing it to retreat toward the craft. They will call the others now, she said. Then we head back before they close in. Rian replied. They moved quickly, the rain covering their retreat. Behind them, The glow of the craft flickered as the hunters regrouped. The storm's roar swallowed any sound of pursuit, but both knew the fight was far from over. By the time they reached the cabin, Ryun could feel the weight of what they had just done. They had not stopped the hunters, only delayed them. Loom stepped inside, dripping water onto the floor, and looked at him with a steady gaze. "You have placed yourself in the middle of something far larger than your world," she said. Ryun set the rifle down and met her eyes. "Maybe, but you came to my door, and I am not done helping you yet." Outside, the storm raged on, and somewhere in the valley, the hunters began to move again. The storm had not slowed. It pounded the cabin roof like 1,000 small hammers. The green flashes in the sky came faster now, almost like signals. Ryun knew it was only a matter of time before the hunters came in full force. Loom stood near the window, scanning the darkness outside. The black object stayed strapped to her side. Her posture was calm, but Ryun could see the focus in her eyes. She had been hunted before. She knew what was coming. "They will not wait for morning," she said. "They will strike soon." Ryun nodded. "Then we make sure they pay for it." He moved quickly, pulling supplies from shelves. Rope, nails, old metal traps, and a small box of flares. He set them on the table and began working without wasting a second. He hammered nails into 2 short boards and placed them just inside the main door. If the hunters tried to force their way in, they would step right onto them. Loom watched silently. "You plan as if you have done this before," she said. "I have defended this place from wolves and men," Ryun replied. "This will be harder, but not impossible." He handed her one of the flares. "If you hear me yell, light this and throw it outside. The light will blind them for a few seconds. That is our chance to strike." She took it without argument. The first sign of the hunter's approach came as a faint vibration through the wooden floor. Not footsteps, but something heavier, machines. Ryun felt it in his boots before he heard the sound. Then came the faint hum, low and steady, moving through the storm. "They are using scout drones," Loom said. "Small machines to see in the dark." Ryun grabbed a heavy blanket and threw it over the fire. The cabin plunged into darkness. He motioned for her to stay low as he moved toward the window. Through the rain, he saw them, small glowing orbs, floating just above the ground. They moved slowly, scanning with thin beams of white light. Behind them, the hunters advanced in a careful formation, their armor glistening under the storm's glow. Ryun stepped back from the window. "For of them, maybe more behind. They will surround us," Loom said. "It is how they work." "Then we do not let them finish," Ryun replied. He slipped out the back door into the freezing rain, moving round the cabin to a small rise of ground. From here, he could see one of the drones drifting toward the side wall. He raised his rifle and fired. The shot cracked through the storm, and the drone dropped instantly, its light dying in the mud. The hunters reacted at once to move toward the fallen drone while the others advanced faster. That was what Ryun had hoped for. It broke their formation. He returned to the cabin, soaked but focused. "Two are heading for the side. Get ready." The first hunter appeared at the door only seconds later, kicking it hard. The old wood groaned but held. Another kick came, and this time the door burst inward. The hunter stepped forward and instantly cried out as the nails in the floor bit into its boot. Ryun swung the butt of his rifle into its helmet. The impact sent the figure staggering backward. Loom lit the flare and tossed it into the doorway. A bright red light filled the room, casting deep shadows. The second hunter at the door raised its weapon, but Loom was faster. She fired her silver device, and a pulse of light struck the weapon's side, making it spark and fail. Ryun slammed the door shut and dropped the bar across it. Outside, the sound of shouting, strange and mechanical, rose over the storm. "They will try the windows next," Loom warned. Ryun moved quickly, stacking heavy furniture against the largest ones. The smaller windows he covered with planks and nails. The sound of movement came from the roof again. This time, it was heavier. "They are on top," Ryun said. Loom aimed her device at the ceiling. "If they break through, they will drop straight down. We will be ready." A sudden crash came from the back of the cabin. Rian spun toward it and saw the door to the storage shed splinter inward. One of the hunters forced its way through. Weapon in hand, Rian fired before it could aim. The shot caught it in the shoulder, spinning it halfway around. Loom followed with another pulse from her weapon, striking the same spot. The hunter collapsed against the wall, motionless. The others outside seemed to hesitate. Their advance slowed. They are regrouping, Loom said. But they will not stop. Rian reloaded quickly. His hands were steady. Then we keep making them pay for every step. Another flash of green lightning lit the forest. In that moment, Rian saw more shapes moving in the distance. The rest of the hunters were closing in. He looked at Loom. If they get inside with numbers, we cannot hold them. We need to make them come one at a time. Her eyes narrowed in thought. There's a narrow path between the trees at the east side of the cabin. If they use it, they must go single file. Rian smiled grimly. Then we make sure they use it. They moved quickly, shifting noise to the east wall, knocking on it, and breaking branches outside to make it seem like the only way in was that side path. The hunters took the bait. Within minutes, the sound of boots in the mud came from that direction. Rian waited until the first figure stepped into view, then fired at the ground near its feet. The sudden shot made it stop, and the one behind it bumped into its back. That was when Loom fired into the second hunter's weapon, disabling it instantly. The narrow path became a trap. The hunters could not spread out, and every time one stepped forward, Rian and Loom struck before it could fire. After several failed pushes, the remaining hunters pulled back. Their shapes faded into the storm until only the rain and wind remained. Rian kept his rifle ready, his eyes scanning the tree line. They are not gone, just waiting. Loom nodded. They will return. But tonight, we showed them this will not be easy. Rian allowed himself a small breath of relief. The cabin still stood. The core was still safe. But he knew the night was far from over. The storm outside raged on. And somewhere in the darkness, the hunters planned their next move. The wind roared across the mountains, but Rian barely noticed it anymore. His attention was fixed on the dark tree line beyond the cabin. The hunters had pulled back, but he knew they were still out there, waiting, watching. Loom sat at the table, recharging the small silver weapon she carried. The black core was still strapped to her side. Secured by a thick strap across her chest, she looked calm. But her eyes moved often to the windows, tracking every flicker of movement outside. They will return with a plan, she said. They will not rush again. Rian nodded. Then we use the time we have to set our ground. He opened the storage chest near the back wall and began pulling out supplies. Inside were rolls of wire, an old lantern with a cracked glass, fishing line, and a bundle of wooden stakes. He spread them across the table and began sorting them by size and strength. Loom tilted her head slightly. You are preparing traps. Yes, Rian said. I cannot match their weapons, but I can make the ground fight for me. He started with the fishing line, stringing it between two sturdy trees. Just outside the east path, it was almost invisible in the storm's dim light. Any hunter rushing through would trip and fall into the stakes he set just beyond necks. He took the cracked lantern and filled it with oil. He tied a piece of cloth to its base and set it where it could be tipped over with a rope from inside the cabin if they tried to come from the west side. He would light it and send it spilling flames across the mud to block their advance. Loom followed him outside, her steps silent even in the wet ground. She watched as he set a heavy log on a narrow ledge above the back path. A single push would send it crashing down on anyone below. You have done this before, she said quietly. Not against armored soldiers, Rian admitted, but animals can be just as smart as men when they are hunting. I learned a long time ago that you win by knowing the land better than your enemy. When they returned inside, the air in the cabin felt heavier. The storm was shifting, the wind pushing harder from the north. It carried a faint hum low, steady, and growing. They are moving, Loom said. Rian checked the rifle and loaded. Another round, then so are we. The first strike came from the west. Two hunters broke from the trees and rushed toward the cabin. Rian waited until they hit the mud near the lantern trap. then yanked the rope. The lantern tipped, spilling, burning oil in a wide arc. The flames roared to life, forcing the hunters to stop short. One tried to leap over the fire, but the wet ground gave way beneath its boots, and it fell hard. Rion fired at its leg, the impact forcing it to crawl back into the shadows. The second wave came from the east. 3 hunters advanced in a line, moving carefully. The first one hit the fishing line and fell straight into the stakes. Sparks flew from its armor as it struggled to get up. The others tried to pull it free, but Loom fired twice, striking their weapons and forcing them to retreat. "They are testing us again," she said. "They will keep doing it until they think they have an opening," Rion replied. That opening came sooner than expected. A loud crash from the roof signaled that at least one hunter had managed to climb up. Rion moved fast, grabbing the heavy iron rod he kept by the stove. As the ceiling boards began to crack, he jammed the rod upward with all his strength. The hunter above staggered, the force sending it sliding down the wet slope of the roof. Loom fired through the open window, striking it in the chest before it could stand. It rolled into the mud and did not move again. The fight continued in bursts. The hunters struck from different sides, never staying long enough for Rion or Loom to fully corner them each time. They were met with another trap, another trick, another unexpected strike from the humans' defense. After nearly an hour, the attacks slowed. The forest beyond the cabin grew still again, though the storm continued to rage. Rion and Loom stood near the door, both breathing hard. "They are not used to this," Loom said. "They are trained for open ground and clear shots. They do not know how to fight in a place that changes every step." Rion gave a small smile. "That is what gives us the edge." Lightning flashed again, and in that moment, Rion saw the remaining hunters pulling back toward the valley, their glowing visors turned away from the cabin. "They are leaving," Loom said. "Not for long," Rion replied. "They will come back with more, or with something worse." Loom glanced toward the valley. "The core is still the reason they are here. As long as I carry it, they will not stop." Rion's eyes stayed on the tree line. "Then we make sure they do not get the chance to try again." The silence that followed was uneasy. They both knew the night had not ended the fight, it had only delayed it. The hunters now understood they faced a human who would not give ground easily, and that knowledge would make them more dangerous. Rion set the rifle back on the table and began reloading slowly. "Next time, they will come harder. So will we." Loom's gaze lingered on him. "Your kind is something the hunters never plan for. You adapt faster than they can react." Rion met her eyes. "That is how we survive." The storm outside began to shift again, the wind now carrying a deeper sound, something like the distant rumble of engines. Whatever was coming next would not be subtle. Both of them knew they had only bought themselves a little time, and that the real fight was still ahead. The night stretched on, but sleep never came. Rion sat by the window, rifle across his lap, eyes fixed on the shadows beyond the tree line. The sound he had heard earlier was still there, a deep, steady hum in the distance. It was growing louder. Lume moved quietly around the cabin, checking her weapon and the black core. She kept glancing toward the forest, her body tense. "They will not wait for the storm to end," she said. "They want to finish this before daylight." Rion nodded. "Then we will be ready before they come." They stepped outside into the cold wind. The rain had weakened, but the ground was still slick and dark. Rion moved to each trap they had set earlier, repairing the stakes and tightening the fishing lines. He added more obstacles, dragging branches and rocks into the narrow paths. Every small delay they could cause might mean the difference between victory and defeat. When they returned inside, the humming sound had become a steady drone. Loom's eyes narrowed. "That is not just their scouts. They brought a larger craft." Rion frowned. "To take the core, to take me," she said quietly, "and kill anyone in their way." The sound grew until it filled the air. A beam of pale light cut through the trees, sweeping back and forth as it moved toward the cabin. Behind it, the dark shapes of armored hunters advanced in a wide arc. They were not rushing now, they were moving with precision, each step measured. Rion set his rifle on the windowsill and took aim. We stopped them here. The first hunter reached the fishing line on the east path. It stumbled, and before it could recover, Ryun fired, striking its leg. Loom followed with a shot from her weapon, disabling its rifle. The figure fell and did not rise. But this time, the rest did not break formation. They pressed forward, stepping over fallen branches, using their weapons to blast through the obstacles from the west. Another group advanced, keeping low and using the shadows to hide. Ryun spotted them and gave a sharp whistle. Loom turned and fired. Hitting the ground in front of them, sparks and smoke filled the air, forcing them to pause. The larger craft appeared above the trees, its engines pushing against the storms. Fading wind, a long ramp extended from its side, glowing faintly. Ryun knew if they reached the cabin with that ramp, the fight would be over. They will try to surround us, Loom warned. Then we break their circle, Ryun replied. He kicked open the back door and ran toward the slope where the heavy log trap waited. The hunters were climbing the path below, their weapons ready. Ryun shoved the log with all his strength. It rolled down the slope, crashing into both figures and sending them tumbling into the mud. From the cabin, Loom's weapon cracked again and again, keeping the others from advancing. Ryun rushed back inside, breath coming fast. They are pushing from all sides, she said. Then we pushed back harder. The next minutes were a blur of movement. Ryun fired from the east window, then ran to the west to light another flare. Loom shifted between the front and side, striking at any weapon that lifted toward them. Every time the hunters moved in, they were forced to fall back by a sudden trap or a burst of fire. Still, the numbers were against them. More figures were moving in from the trees. The hum of the craft above grew louder as it lowered itself closer. To the ground, Ryun's eyes went to the black core strapped to Loom's side. If they get close, they will take it, and you? She shook her head. Then we did not let them close. He hesitated for only a moment before grabbing a coil of rope from the floor. We give them one target, the wrong one. Working quickly, he tied the rope to a small wooden box and wrapped it in a black cloth. From a distance, it would look like the core. Loom understood immediately and unstrapped the real one, hiding it inside a hollow section of the wall. When the hunters made their next push, Ryun burst out the front door, carrying the decoy. He ran toward the slope, making sure they could see him at once. Several broke from their positions to give chase. Loom covered him from the cabin, firing into the ground near the pursuing hunters. Ryun led them toward the east path, straight into the fishing line and stakes. The first one fell hard, the second tripped over it, and the third slammed into both. Before they could recover, Ryun tossed the decoy box down the hill. It tumbled away into the darkness. The hunters rushed after it, disappearing from sight, back at the cabin. Loom had driven off another group with her weapon, but the craft above was lowering again, its ramp nearly touching the ground. Ryun returned and aimed his rifle at one of the cables holding the ramp steady. He fired, and the metal snapped. The ramp tilted sharply, throwing the hunters off balance. Loom followed with another shot, striking the second cable. The ramp swung uselessly, forcing the craft to rise back into the air. The hunters on the ground hesitated. Their formation broke as they tried to regroup. Ryun and Loom pressed the advantage, firing until the last of them retreated into the trees. The craft hovered for a moment longer, then turned and disappeared into the valley, its hum fading into silence. The only sounds left were the wind and the distant rush of water from the storm's runoff. Ryun lowered his rifle and looked at Loom. They will be back. Not today, she said. They went inside, sealing the doors and checking the traps one last time. The black core remained hidden in the wall, untouched. As dawn finally broke over the mountains, the storm clouds began to part. Pale sunlight touched the wet ground, turning the mud to gold. The cabin stood battered but unbroken, and so did those inside. Loom looked toward the valley. They will tell others what they faced here. Ryun gave a small nod. Good. Let them remember. For now, the land was quiet again, and the two of them had earned their moment of peace.